Hey everybody, Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to give you guys a quick update on my experience with the Sony SEL1018mm wide-angle zoom lens. Now this is an $850 piece of glass, very expensive, no question about it. F4 aperture, optical steady shot incorporated into it, and you've got that nice range of 10 to 18 millimeters. Really compact, does keep the form factor and look of the NEX 7 or 6 or any of the black 5N or 5R models, really right on point. So I do like the fit and finish. It does seem to match the 7 the best, at least in terms of the exact color scheme. That's not going to be important to many of you, and I understand why. I do use primarily the silver 18 to 200, so no explanation necessary. But for those of you who are interested in the fit and finish, you'll be glad to know a perfect match for the 7. But that aside, I'm really here to give you guys, rather than full impressions, because I'm not there yet, more of a comparison of whether or not this lens is right for you, or going with the 16mm pancake with the ultra-wide converter. So with that said, let's talk about price point. I mentioned that this is $850 for this lens right here. The pancake can be found for as little as $150 to $200 right now, brand new, which in my opinion is a pretty good value, but that's in part because it is an older lens. You do have the brand new power zoom lens, but of course that power zoom pancake, even though it has a nice range and some definite pros in its favor, it cannot have the ability, unfortunately, to attach to a wide-angle converter, which this fixed 16mm lens has. Also, this is a much faster lens than that power pancake zoom, but you do have to keep in mind that the copies vary drastically. Some people have great copies of this lens, others have extreme distortion, and that's something that a lot of people aren't willing to spend $1 on, let alone $150 or $200. So even though this lens that I have reviewed extensively in the past does represent a pretty good value in my opinion, especially when paired with either the fisheye or the wide-angle converter, it's certainly not for everyone. Now, I really believe that it depends on which NEX camera you own in terms of which wide angle is right for you. Up until the launch of the 10 to 18 that I recently unboxed for you guys, there was only one option, and that was going with the wide angle you're looking at here, paired with the adapter, the converter. And if you didn't want to go with that $300 package, you could go ahead and stick some legacy glass on here with a converter and go to town. But that certainly is not an option for everyone. In fact, most NEX users out there aren't going to go with manual control or necessarily pick up anything that's going to allow them to have autofocus through an adapter. Most of them want to retain the small form factor that the NEX lineup offers out of the box, and I frankly don't blame them. So if you own one of the less expensive NEX models out there, even if you own the 5N, I will in most cases argue that this is still, meaning the 16mm with wide-angle converter or the other converter, the fisheye, really are still going to be the best value and represent one of the better options for your camera. And I say that only because, in my opinion, it gets a little bit silly to spend close to $1,000 on a body that's not even retailing for half that price. But in terms of actual performance, don't get me wrong, the 5N paired with this lens is going to give you some fantastic images, certainly better than what this lens plus the ultra-wide converter are going to afford you. With that said, that doesn't mean that the price-performance ratio is going to be up to snuff for those of you out there who own the 5N, because even though the 5N is not an expensive camera anymore, not that it ever really was, it certainly wasn't aimed at being the top of the line. The 7 was. It was more of the mass consumption model, but that doesn't take away from its phenomenal performance. The bottom line is, do you really want to spend close to $1,000 on a lens for a camera that right now can be found at around $400 and change? And for many of you, the answer will be no, and I understand why. A full frame NEX may be on the rise, and if that's the case, why would you want to start buying lenses that will be cropped on that new full frame, especially $850 lenses? But if you plan on staying with the non-full frame NEX cameras, and I really shouldn't even be speculating on this because nothing is firm as of right now, then frankly, buying a lens like the 10 to 18 makes a lot of sense, especially, as I mentioned in my unboxing, and right now, if you're not pleased with the results you're getting from the 16mm pancake. So I think it really all comes down to the actual investment in the body, that has to be somewhat proportional to the investment in glass. Granted, glass is always more important in my opinion. I think we'll all agree on that. That's not to say that you should own a bad body, but if we're talking about the 5N and up, in my opinion, 5R, 6, or 7 in the NEX lineup, then you are going to get far superior flexibility and overall imaging in both the still, of course, as well as video department because of that optical steady shot. This is a faster lens, but it is fixed, and again, I can't emphasize enough the distortion on this lens, as well as, I'm not going to say it's not a sharp lens because in terms of center sharpness, it does perform very well, but as you get to the outside, then you're going to see some softness, no question, even if you have the best copy of this lens on the market. Something you're going to see far less of from this. Now, there is still barrel distortion with this lens. I can tell you that right now. I've spent enough time with it that there's no way for me to tell you that at 10 millimeters you're not going to see barrel distortion. But 12 millimeters and up seems to be the sweet spot on this lens. And that's pretty good considering that the 16 millimeter pancake, when paired with the ultra wide converter, is going to give you roughly a 12 millimeter equivalent. So if I was going to put the 12 millimeter, still from this lens up against the 16 millimeter pancake paired with the ultra wide converter, there's no question this is the winner. And frankly, it should be because of its price point. Now, does the difference in image quality really justify, does the difference in image quality really represent a reasonable price difference between the two? No, I couldn't tell you guys that even if the images out of this lens were absolutely perfect, because for every user, what your palette for cost is really going to be different. Every consumer's budget is not the same. And for that reason, this isn't going to be the lens for everyone simply because of its price point. But if you are looking for the best performing wide-angle lens right now that is a native E-mount lens, you are looking at it right here in my opinion. Granted, I do need to spend some more time with it to give you guys full impressions, but that should give you a pretty good idea of which lens is right for you. Again, if you're using some of the lower NEX models, then I think there's no way to go wrong with this. It's a great first wide-angle, and frankly, it was the only wide angle up until the launch of this that was a native E-mount lens. So I think you can't go wrong by getting one of these for free. I know that's a promotion that a lot of vendors have been doing right now with NEX bodies, or even if you purchase it secondhand and combine it with the ultra wide, I think you'll be really pleased with the results. I think it's very underrated, and if you go ahead and take a look at my review of the wide angle converter, you'll see I praise it, and for good reason. It was unmatched until this lens arrived, and many will still think that because of the price difference and overall optical difference, this lens still is not justified. But until I give you guys a full review, I'm not going to pick one direction or another. I'll just continue to stick with the fact that there's no question optically it is superior. It's just a matter of whether or not the price difference is justified in that superiority. If you guys have any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. And of course, as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Later.